Welcome to the Floss Boss Sprint, you guys. This has been a really fun teaching project because despite the weird sounding topic, it's full of all of these opportunities to get to emotions below rational reasons for doing things. So I hope you'll have fun opening up this can of worms and seeing what you can discover. If you just watched the Brene Brown video, I wanted to give you a couple of tips to translating empathy into empathy interviews and design thinking. And by the way, guys, this is like learning anything new. The more times you practice, the better you get at it and the more comfortable you get. But you got to start somewhere. So you guys are going to be starting with 2 live interviews with complete strangers. And it helps your learning a lot because, yeah, while it can seem a little nerve-wracking, it's a great skill to develop. And people don't always say what you expect them to. So it forces you to learn how to follow a conversation and get new learnings. If you watched the Brene Brown video on empathy, I wanted to give you a couple tips on how to translate that into empathy interviews. So the obvious one is your mindset, right? You want to dial up your curiosity and dial down your judgment and have respect for the human beings that are giving you their time. But beyond that, here are 5 things that we've learned that can make an immediate impact into what you get out of your interviews. So here we go. To confirm is you've got a hypothesis in your head and you're going to lead that witness to that until they tell you what you want to think. Intent to learn is here's a big, interesting space. And I want to see, I've got some questions in mind, but I'm also going to be willing to follow where they go so that I'm not missing out on learnings. An example of that is Shimano, who's the maker of high-end bike parts that go on high-end bikes. They have a lot of market share. And when it was leveling out, they could have said, how can I go out and see what will motivate people to buy my bikes? But instead, they said, let's go talk to people that don't bike and understand why don't they bike. And that setup led them to new discoveries and created a whole new category. Okay, number 2 is to ask why and really want to know. And ask why again and again and again. And I've seen this in tons of interviews where you ask a great question, you get a really interesting answer, and then the interviewee just moves on to the next question instead of digging in more. And people are like onions. As you peel back layers, you get to more interesting things. Loss is also a topic like many, and people that you're talking to haven't sat around and maybe done a lot of reflecting on the reasons why they do things or what they're satisfied with or unsatisfied with. So as you go deeper into your conversation with them, you're helping them reflect and you're helping them sort of realize new things. So um, try to come up with some why questions that you're comfortable with. You'll see 2 here that we really like around asking for stories. And the second approach is giving some validation. So, wow, that's really interesting, or that's curious. I hadn't thought of that. Pretend I'm someone who doesn't know anything about this space. Can you explain that to me? So those are all, to me, why questions. Find those that you're comfortable with, and whatever amount you're thinking you're going to ask in your interviews, you could probably double it. Here's number 3, get in the wild. And what that means is get out of the building. There's what people say and there's what people do. And whenever you see inconsistencies between them, so for example, if I ask people and they tell me that they floss twice a day, but when I'm in their home, if they can't even find where the floss is, well, there's something interesting there, right, to dig into. So a classic example of this is a survey that was done years ago to how many hours a week people watch TV and what shows they watch. And the answers are around 5 hours a week and a lot of news shows. Well, then they sent ethnographers to go live in people's homes for a week. And over the course of a week, people just reverted to their natural behaviors. And what the ethnographers saw is it was more like 15 or 20 hours a week, and there was Maury Povich in the lineup. So if you're doing pet research, for example, you might want to go start hanging out at dog parks and striking up conversations with people there. The more you get to the natural way that people are doing things, the more to the truth you get to. Okay, number four is to bring a wingman or wingwoman. Obviously, safety reasons when you're talking to strangers, but as well as that, you're going to have your plan for your interview. And at some point, the conversation may go in a different direction. And your number two interviewer can follow that conversation while you're frantically looking at your guide and throwing out all of these questions that are no longer relevant, gives you a chance to collect yourself and rejoin a new conversation. But even if you are following your guide, the number two person who's not burdened by following the guide or trying to manage it can really listen more organically and hear interesting comments and probe into those further. So working as a team will help you get a lot more. Okay, the fifth one is don't be afraid of the seemingly unsolvable problem. Oftentimes, it's tempting to cast those aside in an interview in favor of something that's a lot less scary to solve. But when people give you two competing desires or a dynamic tension, those are really powerful places for brands to be if you can solve the problem. And here's an example of that. If you're familiar with a service called Acorns or Bank of America's Save the Change program, as it originally was, then you'll know that they solved two competing desires to save money but still be able to buy the stuff I wanted by giving people the option to round up each purchase and have the change swept into a savings account. It might not sound like much, but if you Google this, you'll be blown away by the number of accounts that were opened and the total savings that consumers have done from just this one small change. All right, guys, good luck with your interviews. In the next video, we're going to give you a little live sample of some of the right ways and wrong ways to do your interviews.